And my talk today is about getting you to build an MCP server. But I think it's maybe fair to first explain you what it is, or at least what I interpret it to be, and then you can decide if it's even interesting. Before we kick this off, how many of you have built your own MCP server? Okay, perfect. So the goal is that next time when you go to an event and you get that question, hopefully a lot more of you put your hand up, because it's actually very easy. But why would you want to do that? What is MCP? What are MCP servers anyway? And it's a protocol. It's called Model Context Protocol. And I think it evolved a little bit beyond the name, because it used to be about providing context to the language model, which was mainly in the vein of RAG, right? Like retrieval augmented generation, which just means I get a bunch of text, I give it to the model basically right before I ask my question, and then the model has a little bit of context, right? Context about maybe documents in my company or something like that. But today, I would argue Model Context Protocol is a lot more about dynamically taking actions like agents do, and dynamically fetching context. And it's a lot more about tools, as everybody cares a lot more about agent use cases, because agents are starting to slowly actually work. Agents have been invented even before language models existed. When we had the first language models, people tried to build agents with them. They didn't really work. But now models are getting better, and these start to work more, so that's why people care more about agents, which is also why the Model Context Protocol has evolved to be more about tool use than just about providing context and kind of RAG text into your LLM context. So the problem of not having MCP, what would be the problem? And we're going to get back to this very slide through code. Code I'm not going to write, by the way, because I'm going to fully vibe code it. I ideally wouldn't even look at the code, but I think it's interesting for you to look at the code. So it's not technically vibe coding, but it'll pass. So the world before means that if you do tool calling and you have a tool implementation, so you can define a tool, like the previous presentation showed, you can do it at least in 9 different ways. But you also need to implement the body of the tool. And that implementation can be very simple or complex, but maybe you want to bring together multiple tools, some of which you don't want to write, or maybe someone else is in a better position to write, maybe because it's a tool related to GitHub, and you don't work at GitHub, you don't know the GitHub API. So it's about this idea of reuse, and the protocol standardizes how should we reuse each other's stuff, because you could build something, and I could build something, but how do we plug it into one thing, and that's the protocol for. So it's about standardizing for reuse, so we can go faster with agents that use tools, which is what MCP is all about. So examples, you can have MCP servers that have different concerns, right? Some of them are concerned with databases, some of them are concerned with CRM systems, some of them version controls. But the beauty is also that you can have these different servers that you plug in, but you can also choose where you consume them. And in this list, in this presentation, is not my project at Grok, which is called Grok Desktop Beta, but add it to the list because you can use it for MCP servers, MCP server development, and I'll show you in a little bit what that looks like. But the idea is you can plug in your selection of MCP servers in the client you want to use, because that's the way basically agents start to actually get used. And a lot of traction of MCP came in the IDE. So if you guys use Cursor or you use Windsurf or some other AI native IDE, you may have seen MCP features be advertised, because that's one of the environments in which people are plugging in MCP servers to get tools when they're talking to their SWE agent in the IDE. In Cursor, it's just called agent. And that's another way to consume these MCP servers. And the purpose of MCP servers in that context could be stuff like being connected to your browser where your code is running. So MCP servers there have all kinds of different use cases, but the protocol is not very biased towards coding whatsoever. So maybe you've seen kind of like all this surface area of what MCP is about. And I'm not going to talk about all of it. First of all, we don't have time. Second of all, I don't think a lot of people actually care about these things as much. They care about this guy, the tools definition one. And I think that's where it's getting a lot of traction. Most clients don't even implement resources or prompts. So it's really usually about the tool stuff. The idea, again, being that this protocol could become multi-agent orchestration. That's a vision they painted at the conference. I'm not sure if I buy it necessarily, because there's a lot of observability problems that come from treating kind of agents that can delegate to other MCP servers as, MCP servers as agents, because they can all be communicating to get to you the final answer, and it's hard to really control or see that, but it's definitely something they're trying to experiment with. And I think this is from a few of the slides that talk about what's next, or what kind of where is MCP servers going. So this is kind of forward-looking stuff. What's interesting though, to enable this, they needed this property where an MCP server can also be a client. And that's kind of baked into the protocol as an expectation that a single program, it can be both a client and a server, so that you can get this kind of stacking where this MCP server that's talked to from this MCP client can also be a client to another server, so we can do delegation. That's kind of what they want to do, but we'll see if they actually get there. MCP servers are programs, and programs can be fit into a registry like NPM, or maybe PyPy like the example gives here. And this is still not here yet. They talked about it 2 months, and it's still not here. I don't know why it's not here, but once it's here, the server you'll learn to build today, you can upload there. And then finally, a little bit about dynamically getting MCP servers. I think this is kind of a crazy security reality, because if you dynamically get a random MCP server someone wrote, they might steal all your data, send it off to somewhere. So I guess dynamically finding MCP servers in registries full of approved MCP servers. Certified by Microsoft. Or we trust the DNS system, and we have this existing thing that you can reuse. And it's called this well-known thing that you can add to your domain, and then if you trust the domain name, you can trust its MCP server. For example, someone in the audience, the guy who works for Linear, they just launched an MCP server that's official, and if it comes from linear.com, I don't know, is it .com? linear.com/.wellknown, then I'm pretty likely to trust it because I trust Linear. All right, enough talking. Let's get coding. So I promised you we would vibe code an entire MCP server together live. So let's hope the Wi-Fi works better than it did previously. To show you a little bit of how I vibe code is I cheated a little bit. I copied documentation ahead of time to feed to Gemini 2.5 Pro with max mode, so it gets all the tokens of the documentation. But what? Big spend. Yeah, no expense saved for you guys. So the website of Model Context Protocol has this nice button which says copy page, which gives you a markdown, kind of markdown-ish file that you can then go and give to Cursor, and I just copied that into here as a notepad, and then that notepad can be used when you're prompting. Then we're going to build an MCP server to get Pokemon attribution stats, right? But it's a very long API doc. Luckily, Gemini has really good long context abilities, because we're feeding in this entire thing. I didn't count the tokens, but it could easily be 500K. So we have the server specification, we have the API. Let's just YOLO this guy. So we're going to paste in the prompt, and we need both the MCP server documentation and the Pokemon API. And here's the demo gods that this will do a useful thing. And then we'll get to the point, we're trying to get to the point where we have a JavaScript, TypeScript-based server that we can add to our Grok desktop local MCP client, which is also open source, by the way, which I'll show you the link for later. So first, it starts source index.ts, which is kind of what you want as the entry point. It's going to define the server, and it's going to define the tools. And in the prompt, I've asked it to only focus on getting the Pokemon name or getting the Pokemon stats by name, because the API service of the Pokemon API is crazy. It's a free API, unauthenticated, really cool project, but we only care about this one tiny thing for now. So it's doing a bunch of stuff as your Sweet agent would typically do. It updated or picked the 0.6.0 SDK, which I'm not super fancy about. So let's do a little bit of MCP use right in here. We'll say search the web for the latest MCP version, because we do want the npm install command to use a pretty recent one. So we'll do some searching. I think searching could be auto-approved. And then we'll hopefully have like two-shotted a decent MCP server. So 1.11.0 looks pretty good. Update, or maybe it says that server will update to this. Okay, so now it finally did the thing. I mean, it could have done that itself. Let's give it a try. We'll first try to get it to compile, then we know we have decent-ish code, and then we'll run through the code once, run it, test it, and if it works, PM pizza. npmi, let's see. Okay, so it decided to go into a subdirectory. I hate it when it does this, but I'm okay with that. We'll install the packages, we'll run npm run, what do we have? Build. Time to vibe code. Thanks. No, AI is gonna kill me when, like, I'm not nice. I'm just this very busy boss. Like,
you own the hardware for that.
Yeah. Let's see. And I hope it's not gonna get too messed up with the file path, but I think it's okay. It's all in context. So yeah, it's actually decent. So here we're getting a little bit of just some basic type errors. I think it should be able to fix this.
You didn't need to paste it, or you selected and fixed it not?
I did paste it. I did paste it. It got inserted like this little lines 30 to 47.
You want to load mine or not?
I don't think I am. Let's see. I do have this, and now it will know I have it. Oh. It's falling over. This is the live demo thing. Okay, so it's tripping over. Let me say, wrong
Fix it.
dear. Do a tree.
I usually don't download that.
So it's doing a little bit of directory listing. Now it knows it needs to go into this, and it finds out, hey, we do have everything installed, so that could be the reason. Let's try to build it again. Still doesn't work. So I need to think a little bit harder. By the way, I'm just curious, by show of hands, who's already like coding pretty much like this every day?
That's not going to read back to the whole thing properly, but yeah, to get it to
Yeah.
I reckon that's the new Twitch streaming thing.
Yeah.
Watching devs just like.
Watch me go. Okay, it removed the directory. It
Went
didn't
wrong
do
last
the
time.
install. What is it going on about?
Restart your
Sure. That's where we got. Okay, now the horrible parts of vibe coding. It's a really good demo because now we need to go read the code and know what's okay, so it's binding inappropriately. It cannot find the module. This is not the actual error. We run the build. I think it's just some dumb type error. I can't find it. What do we? I think it might just be the whole subdirectory thing. Let's just move all of this in here. Get rid of this guy. Yeah, I noticed. Then we will try another build. And input sales. Just, I mean, I promised you we would be vibe coding. So. Well, we're at least no longer getting like in this word subdirectories situation. So it will know it's been installed. I restart. I just don't want it. I just don't want to do it. Let's see. Did we build something? Because otherwise, for the sake of your sanity, we'll not focus on this type error. We'll just try to move along with the demo and fix the type error later. Okay, let's see if it works. So, and then if it does work, let's see. It's not really compiling properly. It might be the TS code.
Maybe the module resolution should be used next.
It's not even allowing me node next. Are we, which version of Node are we using? I'm gonna cheat. I prepped this demo properly, so I actually so I mean Gemini effect this one. This is not so let's just run a known good build. And now that we have this guy working, and I'll run through the code. Then let's see if we can bring it up. It's running. So
First try.
so vibe coding is not real, as you just observed. So what I'll show you next is just a basic code definition. So you'll see like how simple it would be for you to write this from scratch. So we define a server, and we give the server tools, and the server tool that we define has a body for execution. So the definition looks a little bit like you would define almost like an agent. So you have the tool, it has a name, it has a description, it has arguments that can be provided. Then those arguments can have descriptions, and these things are fed to the LLM. You've probably seen this. Now that I'll go into the Grok desktop client, so the actual implementation here is just a call to make API requests, it makes an HTTP request. I think most of you have seen fetches and stuff happen. So we have it defined, we have it compiled, we have it built. So we just copy the path to the server. It's a full absolute path, and then I'll show off the client we have. So Grok Desktop has in their settings a way to add MCP servers. I can add one, I'll say Pokemon. I'll use standard I/O for transport types, but we support all the new ones, streamable HTTP and SSE based ones with authentication support. That was a pain in the ass to build. So we'll just have the command be node. It just runs a node process. We add the server. And what's nice, I think, about this this client is that you can dynamically turn on and off MCP servers, which is really kind of a pain in the ass in Claude Desktop if you've used that. So we'll connect to it. It gets connected. We'll have the tool defined here. We can search for Pikachu, of course. I'll say Pika because I think it will do some interesting correction for us. So Pika is not a Pokemon. The API, oh my god, just not good advertising for Grok. Let's try it again. Find Pika stats. So we'll get the Pokemon stats. It will actually use the full name because of the prompt that kind of instructed, use the full Pokemon name in lowercase. It got it back from the server, very neatly represented by the return type of the MCP server. And then what's nice, like we can expand this, of course, and combine it, which is the power of MCP from other servers. So we can add Brave Search as an MCP server, and we can say, get me an image of this Pokemon, and hopefully it will do a search, get some data. It says maybe we'll do Shutterstock. We got Pikachu. So Grok Desktop allows you to quickly iterate with these MCP servers because you can just do the local path to the node script. You change a little bit your MCP server. I just disconnect, reconnect, and we get the updated definitions right here. So it's very easy to iterate. So I'll approve that to you. Get base. I build. I restart get base. So very quick loops, build your own MCP server, see how they can complement other MCP servers that you can run and find and add using NPX and UVX, because that's how we have a registry today. It's whatever on UVX and NPX. Yeah, and be creative, more creative than a Pokemon API. Thank you, that was my talk.
So we have time for a few questions.
Any MCP servers that you recommend for coding or other workflows?
There's one that I should say I haven't personally tried it yet. It's called, I tried it once, but I'm not actively using it. It's called Browser Tools. It has a decent way of getting a screenshot from the browser. I think maybe you can get console logs, so runtime, JavaScript, React errors. You can kind of pipe it back into your vibe coding flow. So yeah, that's one that I like.
So I think the PowerPoint is a very specific example, so it makes sense that it can describe what it's doing. How do you see this working from a generic thing, that for example that makes it useful for SharePoint or Google Drive? If I want to use it, well, it needs to know which specific file is actually there so I can hit this as a source.
Yeah, no, great question. So I think, as you just saw, Gemini has an insane ability to ingest context. So that API document for the Pokemon API, I think, is pretty representative, actually, of most first-party proprietary API services, REST APIs that might exist within your company. I think the reason why MCP servers work over directly exposing raw REST APIs to the LLMs is that you can kind of create an opinionated view, if you will, on your full API surface for a smaller surface that you think could be consumed well from an agent that hopefully is not directly guided by a human, so like a delegated agent that maybe runs on their own. But Gemini, because it has really long context window, and maybe Anthropic's on 2.7 also, but Gemini is much faster and better, at least at long context. Can pretty easily understand what you want out of that very large API surface and expose it as a sensibly structured, semantically sound MCP server. And I think that's where you have to do a little bit of trial and error. But I think if you get started, you'll see that that's pretty easy to achieve pretty quickly. And you can abstract some maybe poor design decisions in your API surface by kind of packaging multiple requests into a single tool definition that the MCP doesn't have to know about all this, this kind of stuff going on behind the actual API calls.
I was referring to Moodle was, let's say, if Microsoft exposes the SharePoint like this, I mean, they don't know which documents are in there, right? So somehow I need to inject this context. SharePoint has these kind of documents, Notion has this kind of documents, Google Drive has this kind of documents.
Well,
so how do you bring this one in?
If Microsoft exposes an MCP server for SharePoint, which they may or may not have done, I don't know, but if they do, usually they have some discovery tools in there. So if they're authenticated, because a lot of these MCP servers now have OAuth built in, so you can use your OAuth 2.1 flow to get into your secure environment through token exchange, and then this MCP server can read from your directories. And the discovery commands are stuff like list files or list orgs, list teams, list whatever, I don't know what entities SharePoint usually have, but then you can get that data in the context and the LM will know. If you don't want that to happen every time your user interacts, you could maybe cache this in a prompt somewhat so that you can kind of pre-bias it towards certain things and maybe turn off the discovery tools if you want. But I think that should work. Does that answer the question? Any other questions?
Yeah, it was a great presentation. It was pretty much fun to be involved with you in the while coding journey. I want to understand in terms of the hosting side of things. I'm aware that there are a lot of third-party options. You could do Cloudflare, or you could use the already hosted ones, pay for a service. But if you want to do this, when we're talking about customers and you're doing production level, and they do not trust other services, and you don't want to bring in more third-party services, how do you have any insights on what kind of a hosting flow would you go through, and do you have an experience around that? Because that's where I am stuck right now, trying to understand who to go ahead with.
Yeah, I really like this question because I think it's one of the most actively discussed areas of MCP right now. We just got some reasonable standardization around remote MCP server support, and Claude actually just launched with their publicly facing available method of plugging in remote MCP servers into the main Claude website. So if you use Claude instead of ChatGPT, you can now add MCP servers that have a remote access URL, use that transport, and use it for your day-to-day Claude use. And so more people are asking the question of like, where should I be hosting these MCP servers? You already mentioned Cloudflare, which I think has done a pretty good job of jumping on this opportunity and providing a serverless or a kind of edge infrastructure approach to hosting MCP servers. I think in terms of like isolation, you really want the Cloudflare model where the process that spins up isn't necessarily multi-tenant. It's just one MCP server that handles specific users, or at least one organization, so you don't have like data pollution risk where maybe the process can be abused to get the access to data of other customers. But I haven't seen much around standardization. It's essentially just you're going to spin up an MCP server process, and that's going to live for some lifetime, and you can do that with all these. It's basically just a Python or a JavaScript program. So wherever you can host those things, maybe lightweight containers, you can host those. But like a really first-party platform that really has kind of one MCP hosting, I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah, same. Like it all looks great while it's local or like you're giving a demo to the customers. But personally, for me, I realized for other examples, like if it's AWS or something, then the question of auth comes into picture, and that's when things have started to get tricky, and it would be really helpful to have like more examples or see how. You mentioned that there's someone from Linear. I would love to listen from them. Like, how are they hosting it, or are they using any third party, or just some ideas?
Yeah, great question. I think it's a pretty big vacuum. I think what will happen is there will be an open source initiative that will standardize how to deploy these things on containerized infrastructure, because that's what everyone's already standardizing on. So some framework, like maybe fast API-ish, that allows you to quickly deploy authenticated multi-tenant based on like some whatever Kubernetes resource you have available. There's nobody I think like that has won this or really built it, but that's what I expect and hope that will become the standard. So you can move from platforms and not be locked into Cloudflare.
Thank you so much.
One more question, if we have time. I don't know, is pizza here?
I'm just going to add a comment on that. So like the MCP stuff wasn't, I don't know, like it wasn't designed to be so fluff it up, but it just basically did. I also had to talk from the founders that worked on this. But if you go on MCP on the topic like model context protocol GitHub during discussions, like the one that the problem you're talking about has got like 300 comments or something.
Yeah.
As in like lots of people are actively contributing. So if you work in an organization, you want to put a point across, do it. And the second one is if you don't understand it, like actually build it, try some of these demos, implement it. Because it's like one of these things that doesn't make sense. And you do it, you're like, oh my god, this makes so much sense. So my recommendation is give it a go, but it will definitely change.
Did Pokemon vanish? Did Pokemon gone these days? Can we talk to Pokemon thingy?
Pokemon's on.
Okay, I want to know if you try one time again. I want to know what's this Pikachu's favorite pizza.
It won't be able to answer. The LM will hallucinate. But I can tell you the answer later.
We drew the GitHub things.
All right, thank you, everyone. All right.